What is going on, guys? Welcome into the Blitz podcast. Today, we are talking the number 3 ranked. Yes, we're into the top 3 now, Cincinnati Bengals, and we do have a very special guest here, big old bandwagon fan, Sam Colman, our resident Bengals fan, the only Bengals fan that I know off the top of my head. This is going to be a fun one. We're talking about one of the best teams that we have in our league. The number 3 team is a team that has been to conference championship game. This is a team that has been to a Super Bowl, and really the first 2 years of this core being put together. A lot to be excited about. Sam, how are we doing?
I'm doing all right. I'm really excited. I've been, kind of anticipating this for about 3-4 months, essentially ever since we lost that game in the championship. I've been waiting to come back to football, and I've loved this team. You can say whatever you want about me being a bandwagon. Don't really care. I got in. I'll claim it. I got in right around that Green Bay Packers game, the Super Bowl year. I bought fully into the team. Say what you will, I don't care. But no, I love this team through and through. Love this team.
I was about to say, have you taken the Ben Roethlisberger jersey down off the back of the door? Is it still hanging up there? Ah, you changed it. Okay.
Joe Burrow jersey.
Well, yeah. Well, I mean, look, if you're going to be a bandwagon, I get it. You got to jump in somewhere. You don't want to be like, oh, yeah, let me pick the worst team in the league just to don't appear like a bandwagon. But at least you're passionate about it. But pretty easy team to be passionate about, as good as they've been since you became a fan here. And it's because of this guy, number 9, Joe Burrow at quarterback, who we have coming in at number 2. We've only got 2 spots left, but he is one of the primary reasons that they are in this spot at number 3. Has been phenomenal, really, since his rookie season. His rookie season was a little rocky, but that is not really, his fault. He missed half of it with a torn ACL injury, and really since then it's been arrows pointing up. And there's definitely an argument to be made, depending on what your preference is and really who's playing the best at that moment in time, that he is the best quarterback in the NFL. I mean, there were spells and points in time last season where he was playing up to that level. There was times in 2021 where he was playing up to that level. I mean, there's not really an intriguing conversation point here. This isn't like San Francisco, who we talked about last week, where it's Brock Purdy, and there's a lot to talk about with that whole situation. I mean, what you're getting from Joe Burrow at this point. You're getting, one of the 10 or 12 best football players in the entire league. Do you have anything to say that hasn't already been said on Joe Burrow?
I think he is the best pure quarterback in the NFL. A point blank period. He's not the best quarterback if you want to, Patrick Mahomes is the best quarterback, but that is because of the things he can do outside of the pocket, extending plays and all that. But Joe Burrow is the best, essentially Tom Brady Jr., if you want to call him that. He reads the field incredibly well, has got a really nice arm. He is that guy. It's not just, Joe Shiesty. It is a bona fide fact. Joe Burrow is that guy. What did he miss? He missed 6 weeks his first season.
Something around there. I think it was 6, 7, 8, somewhere around there. I know it was around midseason.
Yeah, that was rough play.
Yeah.
But I mean, up to that point, his offensive line had been atrocious, and that's been something that I'm sure we'll talk about in a second. But that's been plaguing him his whole career. But that guy,
yeah,
through and through.
I mean, one of the main things with Joe Burrow is he's probably the most well-rounded quarterback. I definitely think there are other guys in the NFL. Justin Herbert's got a stronger arm. Lamar's more mobile. Mahomes can do much more improvising. But Burrow does everything, borderline into maybe not the scrambling as much, but at an above-average to elite level. He is probably the best reader of the field that we have in the NFL now. Aaron Rodgers in that conversation, but with Tom Brady off into retirement, Joe Burrow is firmly in that conversation, especially among the young guys now. Arm gets underrated a little bit. I think that's because you kind of got to pick him apart somewhere. There's no real knock that you can point at and be like, oh, this is what's wrong with Joe Burrow. Doesn't have the biggest arm, especially when you're in comparison with guys like Patrick Mahomes, Josh Allen, Justin Herbert, but has a more than serviceable NFL arm. It's not like I don't know. He doesn't have like a Jimmy Garoppolo, like little
Tua.
Tua. Yeah. Like
Yeah.
he doesn't have he doesn't have a baby arm. Like he's got a little bit of a cannon on him. And, it really helps to have the level of weapons that he has when he's got that cannon. But I mean, Burrow, well-rounded. Do you think that, okay, so this is one of the conversations being had, especially among quarterbacks now. You have Patrick Mahomes. I'm just going to spoil it. I think people have kind of figured out that he's our number one guy here. We have 1 and 5 available. The Chiefs are still on the board. Patrick Mahomes is number one. I know everybody was really concerned. Who was it going to be? It's Patrick Mahomes. But then there's do you think that Joe Burrow is closer to the Patrick Mahomes tier, or do you think he's closer in a tier with Josh Allen and Justin Herbert, Jalen Hurts, those guys?
That's very difficult to really kind of grasp because I want to say he's just kind of on an island of his own. It's almost you go Patrick Mahomes, Joe Burrow, and then you get to that crowd of Josh Allen, Herbert, Hurts, Lamar. You can go through that because you look at Joe Burrow, and as you said, he does everything almost at a borderline elite level. But you look at Josh Allen, and he's got problems reading the field. You look at Herbert, he doesn't really have that issue, but occasionally he'll have those issues. I think it's Mahomes, Burrow, right in the middle. I don't think you really pick a side for where he's on that island.
Well, and the weird thing is, like we talked about it in the Buffalo episode, was that Josh Allen, I think it's, in my mind, it's Mahomes at the top, then Burrow and Allen. And then, I like Herbert a lot. I still think he's got a little bit to prove. I think Hurts has a lot to prove. I think Lamar's got a lot to prove. Aaron Rodgers doesn't really have anything to prove, but he's just kind of, with age and everything. And then we go down another tier into Trevor Lawrence, Tua, Kirk, Watson. But, Josh Allen, we talked about it with the Buffalo episode. When he's on, he looks like the best quarterback in the NFL. But it's just, there are times when he's not, and it's, sometimes it's a couple plays a game, sometimes it's a quarter, sometimes it's not at all in the course of a game, but there's just those things that, Joe Burrow wouldn't do that. But then there are also a couple plays a game where Joe Burrow can't do that. Like, Josh Allen will do some, 65-yard piss missile that there's no other human on the planet that can do that. So that's kind of my take.
I mean, but if you want to look at it, we still beat him in the divisional round last year.
I know.
All right. I think that kind of I think that kind of proved it to a lot of people, and you can tell by the way the media reacted to it. That was the kind of turning point for Burrow versus Allen, because up to that point it was always, Burrow Allen who was closer to Mahomes.
Yeah,
but I think that kind of sealed it.
And also you got to look at the playoff success, like Burrow with the 3-1 record against Mahomes. That's one of the main things. The Chiefs finally get over that hump this year, obviously. But Allen doesn't have that same kind of success against Mahomes nor against Burrow. So I think that is one of the main things that puts him over the top. But another thing that certainly helps him get there is this group of playmakers who we do have number 2, idiot.
Number 2.
You're sporting probably the best trio of wide receivers in the NFL. This is not a closeted take. I think I probably said it in the Seattle episode. I think Seattle is going to be in that conversation just because it's much more well-rounded. You've got 3 guys that, honestly, if you wanted to make an argument that I think T. Higgins is a little overrated, me personally, and I think Tyler Lockett is a little underrated, there's a world where those 3 guys can all play on a T. Higgins level this year. And while you do have Jamar Chase on the top end of that, and then Tyler Boyd obviously behind both of those guys, I'm not trying to hate on this group. This is, right now, is the best wide receiver trio in the NFL, and this is also not a Seahawks episode. You've also got Joe Mixon here, who we've talked about 100 times. The Bengals just hate Joe Mixon for some reason. Maybe it's the off-field stuff. Hasn't really even struggled with injuries that bad recently. But it always feels like there's rumors floating around about the Bengals wanting to get rid of Joe Mixon, or give us Samaje Perine more opportunity, draft a Chase Brown. There was even some rumblings about Travion Williams being the guy behind Joe Mixon if something were to happen. It's just there's always somebody ready to take Joe Mixon's job, and Joe Mixon is just, he's a pretty good NFL running back. Then at tight end, this has always kind of been a weird spot for Cincinnati. I mean, you can't have it all. I do have Irv Smith here. They've been kind of rotating guys in and out here. They had Hayden Hurst last year, who replaced C.J. Uzomah, who went to the Jets. Hayden Hurst goes to Carolina. Now you bring in Irv Smith here, former first-round pick. Has had his health problems, has been, especially for being a first-round pick, has been a bust in Minnesota. Hopefully you can get something out of here. He has the athletic tools, playing with Joe Burrow and playing with this group of weapons. But what are your thoughts on this? I know you had a little bit of a bone to pick with Cincinnati being at 2 and not 1.
Yeah, I personally don't agree with it, but that's definitely bias. Jamar Chase, I think, deserves more conversation as the number 1 receiver in the NFL. I know his LSU buddies over there, and Justin Jefferson hogging a lot of that spotlight. But Jamar Chase, I think, if he stays fully healthy and doesn't miss the 4-game stretch he missed, and puts up some crazy numbers, like he was on pace for, I think he deserves a lot more conversation as that guy. Joe Mixon is definitely a redheaded stepchild of Cincinnati.
That's the second episode in a row that redheaded stepchild has been said. I've heard the expression before, but it has not been used on the Blitz podcast, and it's been used in back-to-back episodes.
Well, it makes a lot of sense here. Like he hasn't done anything wrong. He was almost a 1,000-yard rusher last season. He hit 830.
Shout out to the Carolina game in week 12.
Yeah, where he put up 4 or 5 touchdowns. That was a fun game. Almost beat someone in fantasy purely off that game. That was hilarious.
52 points will do that.
But we are kind of also a tight end factory, kind of shifting gears to where you had C.J. Uzomah played really well with Joe Burrow.
Factory is definitely a term that I would use.
Okay, all right. Well, he got a very nice contract and hasn't done anything in New York. And I doubt Hayden Hurst is going to be fantastic in Carolina. He's going to be okay. I liked Hayden Hurst on the Bengals. He kind of fit this hard-nosed style, but
I think it's more of you put a running back, a okay running back in a good offense, they're going to be fine type situation. You put a good tight end in this offense with all these weapons where they are the 5th priority and they pass the ball so much, C.J. Uzomah, it was kind of the same conversation I had with Dalton Schultz. If you put an average level tight end in the Dallas Cowboys offense, which I think is a very good offense, you're going to get that kind of production from a guy like Dalton Schultz. That felt very, this feels eerily similar to what happened with C.J. Uzomah. He's in New York. He's got Aaron Rodgers, and I haven't heard a word about him all offseason. He's backing up Tyler Conklin now. Almost a complete non-factor, especially now that he's left Cincinnati in that spotlight. He's really made no noise last season. I don't think Hayden Hurst is going to make a ton of noise in Carolina. Irv Smith will probably put up numbers. I'm pretty sure it's a 1-year deal for him.
Yeah,
go sign somewhere else
deal.
and flame out.
Yeah, I'm not shocked. But I am excited about both rookies we drafted this year. The 2 wide receiver rookies have been a very, very high point through training camp. I forget which one they call. They call one of them Yoshi. I don't remember which one it is. I want to say.
I was about to say, is it an easy look at by the name?
I want to say it's Andre
Yosivas?
The 6th round. Yeah, I have no idea
how
to pronounce his last name.
That would make a little bit of sense. It's Andre Yosivas, I think.
Yeah.
That's definitely an I, but I don't know. Yosivas, maybe. And then Charlie Jones. And we talked about this a little bit, was that their depth, so the 1, 2, 3 for Cincinnati is obviously great. But last year, Trent Irwin, you're talking about some of the worst 4, 5, 6 in the entire NFL after you get past those 3. So that's why, we were really concerned when Jamar Chase went down for a couple games. We were really concerned when T. Higgins was missing time because there was no depth there. Hopefully you can get something out of these guys. I also want to return back to your Jamar Chase conversation. I 100% agree. I think that, I can't remember if I brought it up, but a kind of a clause to take him on is that Justin Jefferson's getting a little overrated as an NFL wide receiver. He produces at an elite level, but I definitely think that it's not a Justin Jefferson and is it a tier of his own at wide receiver 1 in the NFL. I think Jamar Chase is firmly in that tier. I think Tyreek Hill is firmly in that tier. I think Devontae Adams is as well. When he's healthy, I think Cooper Kupp is in there as well. So there's a lot of guys that you can 100% make a conversation for just on any given year. Obviously, again, Jefferson's putting up the numbers, but
I feel like Justin Jefferson's also putting up a lot of those numbers because he hasn't had a very good wide receiver two around him that whole
Hey, I
time.
mean
I mean,
Thielen.
Adam Thielen,
I mean
but I mean,
that's a better
you
two
want to
than
compare,
Adams, not Tyreek and Jamar. So I get that, but
but you want to compare him to having two other wide receivers who T. Higgins will probably be a wide receiver one on another team next season,
Adam
and
Thielen is
Tyler
the wide
Boyd.
receiver one on the team right now, buddy. Don't you forget.
Hey! It's the Carolina Panthers who that's like their only receiver. You have him, Jonathan Mingo, and DJ Chark, and that's all that
You
I
set
can
out the
name
parameters.
on Panthers.
I just filled out what you said.
Oh, okay, all
Wide
right,
receiver
all
one.
okay. But I think or Jamar Chase would put up those stats in an offense by himself. Essentially, I feel that way.
Yeah. So just quick conversation, then we'll move on to the offensive line. So Joe Burrow is about to get paid. He'll probably be the highest paid player in NFL history within, I don't know, maybe the next few weeks, maybe by the end of the season. Who really knows on that? I think because of the fact that Justin Jefferson will get paid in 2020, Jamar Chase will be made the highest paid wide receiver in the NFL, but that's going to come after there's a decision made on T. Higgins. Now, are you pro pay Joe Burrow, Jamar Chase, T. Higgins, and figure everything else out? Or would you rather trade Higgins away? I mean, I know that was a big conversation point this offseason is like, should the Bengals trade T. Higgins now before he would be entering free agency next year because they're going to have all these contracts start to pile up. You know, they've even got some good defenders that are putting up statistics and are going to want to get paid. And if, Lou Anarumo, who we'll talk about later, is a great defensive coordinator, but you can't start picking apart a team that already has, pretty run-of-the-mill pieces on defense and downgrading them even. I mean, if you take out Lou Anarumo, is this a top 10 defense in the NFL? Probably not. There's a lot of good players on it, but
I still think it's a top 15 defense with talent listed. I mean,
Trey Hendrickson's the best player on the defense, and he's a good player, but he's the best player on the entire defense.
And then you have DJ Reader, who was one of the best best run stuffers in the league. It's great.
Yeah,
I will say Sam Hubbard's really bad, but
okay. But are you pro pay Higgins and figure the rest out, or would you rather just trade Higgins, get a first round pick, and kind of build the rest of the roster up like Kansas City did, for example?
As much as it would hurt, I do think we should get rid of T. Now, whether that's something we do, I really don't know. Chad Johnson, or was it Hushmanzada, made a good point about it. Was they've never had a problem paying a quarterback and one receiver. It's always the wide receiver two that they have a problem paying. And I think that's why we took two wide receivers here in the draft, was probably to get prepared for T. Higgins and Tyler Boyd leaving in it's not this offseason, it's next offseason.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah. T. Higgins is a free agent this offseason because he was a second round pick in 2020. Yep. And then Jamar Chase, you have him for 2 more years because you've got the extra draft year plus the 5th year option. Also, funny that Hushmanzada said that because he was the wide receiver 2 for those teams.
Yes. So I do think we probably should trade T. Higgins and see what we have through the pipeline. You commented about Trent Irwin. I made fun of Caden, who was on that Ravens episode, about him being probably a wide receiver 1 on that Ravens team last year.
Yeah, a little bit. I mean, when it really got down to it and Bateman was down and it was Devin Duvernay and Trent Irwin would have made a nice pairing. All right, let's move on to the offensive line here, which we do have ranking towards the middle of the pack at 14th. An offensive line that has come a long way. I mean, we remember very specifically remember the memes that were coming out in that 2021 draft, and it was, Penei Sewell blocking and anybody catching equals touchdown. Anybody blocking and Jamar Chase catching equals a sack. And they obviously go with Jamar Chase. It seems to be the right decision at this point in time as they built up this offensive line. Jamar Chase, an all-pro level wide receiver. But it's taken a few swings of the bat. I mean, you'll notice if you look around on the depth chart here, Lyle Collins, who was their big signing of last offseason to play right tackle, was supposed to be Joe Burrow's, not blindside protector, but a protector of him at right tackle. No longer making the depth chart here because he was not very good, to say the least, in his first year in Cincinnati. He's now the third string right tackle for this team. So they ultimately go out and they go get Orlando Brown. That was one of the bigger signings of the offseason, giving him a 4-year, I believe, $64 million deal, which is a far cry from the 6-year, $132 million deal that he turned down from Kansas City, which I said at the time was one of the biggest mistakes that I've seen in a very long time as far as a player turning down an extension, because Orlando Brown isn't worth nearly close to that. And we saw that in his contract this year, less years, less money per year, cost himself, I mean, that's $64 million versus 132. That's literally half of what that contract would have been worth. I mean, obviously the years are a little bit more, but he's going to come in here. I've never been an Orlando Brown guy. I think this is going to be an interesting experiment because not a great pass protector, really good run blocker, but not really what you want pass protection. He's going to be the blindside protector for Joe Burrow, who already has a calf injury in camp, has had a torn ACL. This team is done if he goes down. But the rest of this offensive line, pretty solid stuff. You got Jonah Williams here, who, if I'm not mistaken, did request a trade or was at least reported as unhappy.
It's okay now.
In this offseason.
It's okay now.
Ended up, I guess, working itself out because he's here playing right tackle, which I kind of did think he was going to get traded because it is a contract year for him. He'll probably be gone after this year because some team will pay him to be their left tackle as opposed to him staying here and playing right. You do have some solid pieces from last offseason in Alex Kappa and Ted Karras, and then the second-year player Cordell Volson rounding out the rest of the group. So I'll just pass it over to you, a 14th group. What do you think about that?
I think that's more than fair for us. This, sadly, will probably be the best line that Joe Burrow is going to be behind. Which is really saying something considering it's the 14th ranked line. And there's a good chance that, if Orlando Brown goes down and we're forced to start La'el Collins, who, by the way, was like 61st on PFF.
Not good.
Yeah, we're going to really struggle. But I love Ted Karras with a passion. Like, if I had to go buy a lineman jersey, I'd go buy his right now. He sells hats, and I want to go buy a hat. Like, I love Ted Karras. There's that video of him running off the field in Tennessee, shouting at the Tennessee fans.
I've got a video of him stomping through the snow on the graphic here. I'm pretty sure that I would imagine this was in the Buffalo game because I can't remember too many snow games that they played in. But
yep, would be the Buffalo game. But he's awesome. I remember I really wanted us to go get Jensen from the Bucks instead of Kappa initially.
Yeah.
And then when we signed Kappa, I was like, yeah, it's all right. And he's turned out to be pretty solid. And to your point about Orlando Brown not being that good, it's still going to be a massive jump from Jonah Williams starting to Orlando Brown starting. So I'm A-okay with it. Just get him some protection, please, for the love of God.
My God, I'm looking through I'm trying to find La'el Collins in the rank. I know you said you had him 61st. I just wanted to find out how many it was, but scrolling for quite a bit trying to find him.
68th out of 81. 60, yeah. And then Jonah Williams was 61st.
And I remember when they signed him, I was like, wow. Like, it was like, I think it was a 3-year, 21 or something around in that range, maybe a 3-year.
Yeah, that's right.
It was pretty cheap money, especially for a starting tackle. I mean, when we paid Okorafor, we paid him, I think, more per year than they were paying La'el Collins. And La'el Collins at one point in time was a, definitely starter level tackle, maybe even a little bit more than that in Dallas. And I was like, what are we doing? But obviously, hasn't really worked out for him in Cincinnati. I'm really surprised you guys haven't let him go yet. Maybe when they do roster cuts, I don't know if it's a lot of dead cap, but it was only a 3-year deal, so I can't imagine it's too much. But if he's your third string tackle right now, don't really know if he's going to work his way up the ladder, considering he would be given the benefit of the doubt with his money to be like at least the backup left tackle or something. Or Jackson Carman, I mean, he's played all over the offensive line. Why is he the backup right tackle of all positions? Maybe that'll change as we go through, but
I think they have probably moved Carman, but he wasn't very good. Carman,
I liked Carman coming out. I think I'm just holding on to that. That's all.
Yeah, I was gonna say you've definitely got to be holding on to something because I'm someone who's watched a lot of these games. It's not good. Like this is really bad. Like Adenji is still on the roster for some reason. Like it's just bad. Just
Yeah.
this offensive
Some of
line
those,
reeks when you take away the starters. And I feel like that's been the case for the past few teams you've talked about. It's just, once you get through these starters, it's bad.
well, and that's the thing is a lot of offensive lines like that. That's why I went on a run of a couple teams in a row. Like we talked about it with Washington. I think we talked about it a little bit with Pittsburgh, but like as far as like having a sixth man on your offensive line, like that's very valuable because some of like I think Pittsburgh with Kevin Dotson, Washington with Cornelius Lucas. There's a couple other teams that I'm missing, but having that guy there really matters. Like if a guy goes down, if you have a guy that you can just plug into either a tackle or guard spot, especially if he is like a swing tackle that can play multiple positions, that's super valuable because offensive linemen get hurt all the time. Like throughout the course of a season, very rarely do you see an offensive line stay healthy from week 1 to week 18, much less through the playoffs, which this team expects to be playing through. So depth, it matters. And it's kind of hard to find because there's not, 160 good offensive linemen in the NFL, much less more than that, to the point where everybody's got good backups. Like that, completely off topic here, but that was one of the main problems with like XFL and USFL startups is because if they're even decent offensive linemen, they're going to the NFL and they're going to at least be backups or practice squad guys, and quarterbacks are just getting eaten alive. Completely off topic rant there, but we're going to move on to the front seven. Yeah. To the front seven here. We do have them right in the middle at 16th. I honestly think I would put them a little bit higher. I like this group a good deal. It's a well-rounded group. It does have a little bit to do with the coaching with Lou Anarumo here, but you do have a lot of good pieces here. DJ Reader, one of the most underrated players in the NFL, completely clogs up the run game for them. If they don't have him, they are in trouble in run defense. You also got Trey Hendrickson, another one of the more underrated players in the NFL, starting to get a little bit more shine now that Cincinnati as a whole is getting a little bit more shine, but was, sneaky signing for them when he signed him away from New Orleans after he had like a crazy production year on like some low amount of pressures just like out of nowhere. And he's really panned out here to be. He's produced like one of the better edges in the NFL. You got Sam Hubbard on the other side, fine player. They do retain this linebacker core, which I did not think they were going to do. Jermaine Pratt said, "This is my last year here," after cussing out Joseph Asai after he cost you your season, in short. And then Logan Wilson just got extended. Congrats to him on that, playing at that middle linebacker, like that true Mike linebacker spot. So really well-rounded group. You don't have any superstars here. Like I think obviously Trey Hendrickson is the closest thing to that. But like you're not putting him in the top 10 edge rush conversation just because that group's so crowded. Like edge rushers is such a competitive spot. I mean, like you're getting down to the 5th best edge rusher, like Max Crosby, and like it's just a very crowded group. Trey Hendrickson, still a great player in a great group, but what are your thoughts overall on this front seven?
I was a little kind of shocked that we got Pratt back out of that, out of the big three that left. I definitely wanted Von Bell, me personally, but getting Pratt back, I'm not upset about it. I'm very excited about going out and getting Miles Murphy in the first this year for us. I feel like is very big considering that Sam Hubbard did nothing in terms of rushing the passer. It was essentially all Trey Hendrickson. Especially like all up and down this line. Like DJ Reader didn't get after the passer, Sam Hubbard didn't. It was just Trey Hendrickson. He was 3rd in the league in pressure rate. It was like 13. He's terrific. And Logan Wilson too, another kind of really underrated guy who without him on this defense, it's definitely a lot different. There's not much that can be said about these guys, sadly. It's definitely a very middle of the road. I think 16's perfect.
16's
perfect.
Definitely describes them very well, especially just because there's not a star here like we talked about. You are developing Miles Murphy here. I did forget to mention him, was a first-round pick out of Clemson. I think you are excited about what he brings. It's going to take a minute. Like he's a project edge rusher. He's going to bring a lot of power. He's going to bring a lot of athleticism, but he's going to need to refine that to get to where they want him to be, which ideally, I'm pretty sure Sam Hubbard a free agent after this season?
Yes. We've got a really deep free agent class this year. I know.
Yeah.
Chitto's in it.
Hendrickson
I think
was supposed
Hubbard's
to be
in it. But is now not. DJ Reader's in it.
Defense. Your defense is in it.
And we're gonna lose Lou Anarumo this year. So
Yeah.
no matter what, this
I
defense is
was
gutted.
absolutely shocked he did not get a singular head coach. He didn't get an interview, did he?
He got an interview at Arizona. Arizona
Okay.
got him to the final 3 interviews, and he wasn't picked. They picked
Unbelievable.
the Eagles defensive coordinator.
They picked up Gannon. So, and that is one of the reasons why me personally, I'm a little bit higher on this defense. I think Lou Anarumo is one of the best defensive coordinators in the NFL. Like we said, this is not a defense with a bunch of special pieces, but he's made it a special defense. To pair with this offense, it's going to get the job done. I mean, it could be like we think back to those Kansas City teams from 2 years ago or those Dallas teams from a few years ago where they had the dynamite offense, but the defense, it just didn't have the names on it and it wasn't doing anything. Teams, they were having to put up 30, 40 points a game to win games. This is not the case here in Cincinnati, even with, a pretty average supporting cast on the defensive side of the ball. But I'm a little excited about Miles Murphy, is a project player, but they're going to need to speed up that process because he's probably going to be in line for a starting role next year, with all the cap moves that they've got to make, with guys like T. Higgins, with guys like DJ Reader, Sam Hubbard, Chidobe Awuzie. Some guys are going to be lost. I definitely feel like Sam Hubbard might be the odd man out there, just not getting a contract unless he takes like kind of not a hometown discount per se, but just to stay here in Cincinnati. All right, let's move on to the secondary unit, which we do have at 14th here. Got a little bit of an overhaul. You lose the guy that was probably the best player on this defense in Jesse Bates. He is headed out to Atlanta on a pretty sizable contract that Cincinnati, with all these contract conversations that we've been having, they can't afford to pay, quite frankly. But you do still have some nice pieces here. You do have Steelers legend Mike Hilton playing in the slot. You got Chidobe Awuzie as well, one of the more underrated corners in the NFL. Did miss a bulk of last season. Was it all of last season, or was it just...
It had to be at least like halfway through the season because I know that I was like all over Chidobe Awuzie before the playoffs.
All over him.
Yeah.
Whoa. But you do have kind of an influx of youth coming into this starting group. You've got Cam Taylor-Britt, who did start most of the season last year, if I'm not mistaken, right?
10 games of the season, yeah.
Yeah. So not really, taking over here per se, but guy who is taking over as a starter is Daxton Hill. Played only about 100 or so snaps last season, but is going to become the full-time starter at safety. There were questions of whether he'd be a safety or slot corner, but with Mike Hilton, firmly taking that slot corner role, it's going to be safety for Daxton Hill. I think this is a pretty well-rounded group. Like, you look around, there's not any superstars, but I don't really think there's any holes really either. I think Daxton Hill could very well become a good, at least an average starter in the NFL. Did struggle a little bit in his few snaps last year, but you're hoping for some improvement there as a first-round player. But what are your thoughts overall on this secondary?
I mean, you had to see his play in that Green Bay preseason game just a little bit ago. That was great. That the play made coming from midfield all the way over to get that ball out was
my mistake. I'm sorry. I should have.
Exactly. Come on, man. But more importantly, we got rid of Eli Apple, so I feel like we win this offseason no matter what. But
also Von Bell as well as a loss on this.
I don't need to bring him up.
Figured I'd mention it.
No, this I was kind of wowed by what I saw in CTB when he stood up for Awuzie when he was out. Was really happy with him. Awuzie missed 8 games last season, by the way. You go pick up Nick Scott, who, from a lot of what I'm hearing, is kind of what Von Bell was when he first came in, but I don't think it's going to be similar. Yeah.
I think that Von Bell, they're going to feel that loss. Him going to Carolina. Yeah. He was able to come down and thump a little bit when Jesse Bates playing that true free safety role. They're gonna miss that. I really do think so. Just he was a pretty good for run defending safety, and that yin yang between those two. I mean, it's really hard to replace both of your safeties in the same offseason and implement an outside hire and a second year guy who really struggled in his rookie year. I think out of all the groups on this team, I mean, this isn't the lowest. The front seven is the lowest, but I definitely feel better about the front seven. Just in comparison to each other than I do the secondary.
This is definitely a kind of like nameless unit. Like, I mean, you're going off Chidobe Awuzie, and that's it. I mean, Mike Hilton's here,
Respect Mike
but
Hilton.
so sorry. But you've got Dax Hill and Cam Taylor-Britt were both last season. You've got Jordan Battle, who's backing up. Dax Hill, going to be that extra third safety, I assume. You also go out and get another corner. I mean, it was a 7th rounder, so you're not really going to worry about it too much. But it's kind of an odd unit. I'm confident in this unit. If Chidobe Awuzie's healthy, I've seen enough from Cam Taylor-Britt to know that this is going to be a team that's able to stop the pass enough. It's going to be a good enough unit, and that's very similar to the front seven. Just a very good enough unit that with Lou Anarumo and his scheming is going to be able to shut down teams in most scenarios, or get. They're not going to force you to score 30, 40 points a game. It's going to be more like 20, 30.
Yeah.
Which, that's okay.
Yeah. You guys can do that, I think. But you also draft, I don't know if you mentioned, but it was DJ Turner, the 2nd-round pick out of Michigan. I'd honestly be pretty excited about him as well. Kind of the same situation with Myles Murphy, but as a corner, super athlete, was, an all-time, maybe not an all-time tester, maybe I'm pushing it a little bit, but runs a 4.26, 5'11", not exactly elite size, but also had like a pretty like 90th, nearly 90th percentile broad jump as well. So really good athlete here. He's going to be your typical Cincinnati man coverage corner. This team runs just as much man coverage as anybody. And I don't know, maybe he could be challenging Cam Taylor-Britt for that second corner spot. Who knows? Maybe he's just a contingency plan for Chidobe Awuzie. But I got to give credit to the Cincinnati front office, because you look at these spots that could potentially become open in after this season. We talked about edge with Sam Hubbard, and then even at the time of the draft, I'm pretty sure Trey Hendrickson didn't have a contract at that point in time. He got his extension post-draft. So they go get Myles Murphy, and then you've got some question marks about Chidobe Awuzie returning, and they go draft DJ Turner. So they're trying to be out a year ahead of the curve. You don't draft for your needs. You try and get out ahead of it. So I got to give them credit for that, and hopefully DJ Turner ends up working out for them. Well, not really hopefully, because, but...
Oh, yeah.
For your sake, I guess, for your sanity.
The other thing, you got to think, what was it, 3 years back, the first Burrow year, where they went out and they had a massive free agency where they signed, it was 10, 11 guys. They went out and got Trey Hendrickson that offseason. They got DJ Reader that offseason. They got Chidobe Awuzie that season. It was like a crazy rebuild for the defense, and all those people are still around and are so much better off for it than what their contracts are.
That is, transition moment, because of we talked about earlier, one of the best defensive coordinators in the NFL. I really usually lead with the head coach, but the transition was too good. To Lou Anarumo, who has, like I said multiple times this episode, what I think to be one of the best defensive coordinators in the NFL, has turned a group of, average to below average parts into an above average defense that, can really help you win games in the playoffs. You're not winning in spite of this defense. You're almost winning because of it in some weeks. And again, not a whole lot of special parts there, but you've also got the head coach here, obviously Zach Taylor. I had a lot of things to say. I have not been a Zach Taylor enthusiast at multiple points in the Cincinnati Bengals. Since he's been here with Burrow, I've said that they should let him go. They need to go get a different head coach. I just don't think he's the guy. But he has made one of the biggest, I wouldn't say turnarounds, but one of the biggest improvements that a head coach can make while staying in the same spot. I think he has really improved as a head coach. He's gotten better just, running the offense. There was a point in time where even with Joe Burrow, Jamar Chase, T. Higgins, Joe Mixon, Tyler Boyd, this offense was stagnant. Especially to start last year.
Yeah, 5-4. We started 5-4 before the bye, and I remember multiple times calling for his head in multiple group chats.
And it was a couple times they would start the season slow. They did this in 2021 as well, where it was just they got to fire him, right? They've got to let him go. This team has now, especially Super Bowl expectations. If you come out in 2023 and they start slow, I think the pressure's going to be on. I don't think they'd fire their coach midseason, especially with Super Bowl expectations, because when you fire your coach midseason, usually doesn't lead to good things. And also, we've talked about it with a couple of these coaches in the top 10 that potentially they could be let go if the team disappoints. I don't think that's the case here in Cincinnati. I think he's proved enough that he, regardless of what happens, unless they miss the playoffs and everybody's healthy, that he's going to earn another year here in Cincinnati. But he's not without criticism because this should produce like the number one offense, and sometimes it doesn't. This should be a historic offense. You have the number 2 quarterback, the number 2 group of weapons, and a now above it. Literally, if you're calling average 16th, this is above average offensive line. So you need to produce like number 1 offense type levels, I think, with this group of pieces that he has on offense for me to be happy with Zach Taylor's performance. I haven't let you talk throughout all of this, so if you have anything
no, you're spot on with it. And I personally, I wouldn't be shocked if we got off to a slow start again this year, and it's really going to suck considering our bye is week 6, and we have our easiest part of the schedule before the bye, and we're going to come out slow because that's what we have always done through the Zach Taylor era. It's just there were so much we went to the Ravens game, and just sitting there, there's just so many play calls that were like, why are we doing this?
Inside zone.
And why do we have Samaje Perine on the field was a big thing that I was screaming about. The last play of the Super Bowl, I was screaming, why do we have Samaje Perine on the field? And it was just a lot of the things that he's done, play calling wise, hasn't been right. And you could almost tell there were just points where he'd give it to Joe Burrow and be like, just please go make something happen.
And it
felt like that
was the main criticism, especially in that 2021 run. It was like, look, I can't do this. And then Joe just figured it out. And, they made a Super Bowl run. So maybe Joe Burrow needs to be that coach here. But that was the main criticism. But it does feel like he's starting to turn it around a little bit as a head coach. I feel a little bit better about him in Cincinnati. I was kind of looking forward to him being a problem for them. Doesn't seem to be the case anymore. We do have them ranking it at 19th. I think that is boosted up a little bit by Lou Anarumo. I just spoke about all the things about Zach Taylor. If Lou Anarumo's not here, this drops at least 3 or 4 spots. And then they're into that tier with guys, like D'Amico Ryan's first-year head coach, Frank Reich, first year in Carolina, Ron Rivera on the hot seat, Arthur Smith on the hot seat. Really rough tier there. But Lou Anarumo bumps this group up a good bit. All right, so let's move on to the schedule. This is our highest win total I'm pretty sure that we've had yet at 11.5 wins. The strength of schedule right in the middle of the pack at 17th. They're in the AFC North, so they're going to play all those teams twice, one of the toughest divisions in football. They've also got to face off against the NFC West and the AFC South, and then all of the other first-place teams from the AFC, which is KC and Buffalo. It could be worse. Obviously, you're playing the worst division in the AFC. You're playing, the second best division in the NFC, coming out to 17th here. 11.5 wins. How are we feeling about that number?
I would be. I'm going to hit under on it, to be honest. I think we're probably going to hit 10 wins. We might hit 11, but coming off the bye. 10
is a wild card in this division. You're not winning the division with 10. So you think this is a wild card team?
I think that we're going. I also think that the Ravens are probably going to have 10 wins too. It's going to be a battle of who won more times in the division, and if we split the division, it's going to be a crapshoot on who's going to get in, who's not. But you look at coming off the bye, you get San Fran in San Francisco. You do get Buffalo at home, and then you get an easier game with the Texans, but you've got to go to Baltimore. You get the Steelers, which Steelers midway through the season.
Get curb stomped.
Yeah, you get the Panthers in Jacksonville. It's going to be rough games.
There is a world, though, where the Bengals walk into the bye week 6-0. There's a world.
Oh, absolutely.
Because you've got Cleveland in Cleveland. I think they're favored in that game in week 1. You got Baltimore.
Spread.
Yeah, you got Baltimore. I think they're favored at home. They're obviously favored against the Rams. They're favored against the Titans in Tennessee. They're favored against the Cardinals in Arizona. Seattle at home, I think they're favored in that one too. So you very well could walk into week 7, or walk into week 8 technically, 6-0, And at that point, you got to win 4 games, and you've got the Texans, the Colts. I guess that
Vikings, if you want to count
yeah, I
them.
was about to say Vikings, Steelers, Browns. Get the Steelers twice, I think. Like I
So,
think we split with
uh,
you all. I'm
mhm.
probably going to go over. I think they'll hit 12. You're making us look bad having our number 3 team with a projection of 10 wins. So this will be your last time on here. But
All right.
but
I'm just trying to be a realist
no,
here.
we appreciate your honesty. I'd much rather you do that than come in here and be like, oh, we're winning 16 at least. Um, like I said, I'm probably going to go 12. I think this is the best team in the division. I am high on Baltimore. I'm getting higher on Pittsburgh than I feel like every day. There's a new
Getting
media
higher on
outlet saying
Pittsburgh.
that Pittsburgh's going to, turn around this year and could be one of those teams. But then again, you're in this loaded AFC where you look up, like you're like, wow, Pittsburgh's a playoff team. You start counting out that there's 7 playoff spots, and you're like, well, maybe not. But I definitely think Cincinnati's earning a playoff spot. I don't think there's any doubt about that.
Yeah, no doubt. I think if they miss the playoffs this year, then we're really gonna have a conversation about Zach Taylor getting fired.
If they
I
miss
don't
the
think that's gonna
playoffs
be a
and
question.
Burrow
But
plays 17 games, Jamar Chase plays 17 games, Zach Taylor's probably
he's gone.
fired.
Yeah.
And honestly, I think there's a world in which Lou Anarumo gets promoted
hmm
because,
I would love that.
especially
I'd be
within
so
house,
thrilled.
the one thing that concerns me there is, if that happens, you then would probably have to fire your offensive coordinator too, because if um, the Bengals missed the playoffs, something happened with the offense.
Yeah.
And, Zach Taylor does play a big part in that, and that's why you're letting him go, but as does the offensive coordinator. And then you're cleaning house and a coaching staff for a team that was been in a Super Bowl and a conference championship game. But this is a very unlikely scenario of them missing the playoffs. We have them at third for a reason with the number
hmm
2 quarterback, the number 2 group of weapons or playmakers. Got to get the wording right.
Yeah.
Highly doubt that they miss the playoffs. This is going to be closer to a number 1 seed than a team that's
Then the
looking
missing
on
the
the
playoffs,
outside looking in.
absolutely.
All right, let's wrap it up here with the rankings recap. We have the Bengals coming in at third, as I've said 100 times. We do have our number 1 ranked offense here in Cincinnati. Pretty easy math there. Number 2 quarterback, number 2 group of playmakers. Not a lot of teams have that combination, especially when the 2 main guys from those 2 groups went to college together. But then we do have this defense. We've talked about it this entire time. This is a middle of the pack defense. Have them right at 17th, so right under that average line. But they're probably going to play out better than that. Like, would not be surprised if statistically this is a top 12-ish defense. Because of that defensive coaching, all these guys, you don't have a whole lot of weaknesses. You just don't have a lot of strengths. But they're going to play well, and this offense is going to keep pressure on teams, force offenses into making mistakes because of they got to be aggressive. How do you feel about 1 for the offense and then 17 for the defense?
Well, I'll start with defense first. Last season we were tied 11th in the league, which I feel like losing 2 really big pieces on the defense, going down to 17th. I feel like that's on the money. I don't think that's you really mess that up. Offense number 1, yeah, absolutely. If you're gonna
So
make an argument for another team,
10-win
really,
team.
yeah, for a for a 10-win team, we're gonna have a conversation. But no, this Joe Burrow, Jamar Chase, T Higgins are that big 3. No one's really gonna be able to touch that big 3. Yeah. This is the number 1 offense in the NFL. It was the number 1 offense last year, was it?
It probably was, if I were to take a guess. I did slander it as if it wasn't, with no statistics to back that up. But
yeah, but this team is very special. I'm gonna hate to see somebody leave this offseason in T Higgins, or unless we sign him, and then we're gonna be in contract hell for 5 years,
okay.
Which will be something.
And then the championship window. I'm pretty sure I said this last episode, but this is our biggest championship window yet. 2 to 3 years left. Now, that's a little weird because we've been talking this entire episode about impending changes that could happen at the end of this season. The defense could get picked apart a little bit. They could lose T Higgins. They could lose Lou Anarumo. And then you're feeling a little bit worse about this team, but you're probably, God, I hope so. You're going to, or not I hope so, but God, you hope so. they lock up Joe Burrow, they lock up Jamar Chase, and I feel like as long as those two are on the roster and wearing shoulder pads, this is a championship level team. Like, you're not going to find too much better of a wide receiver quarterback duo, and I think those are the two most important positions in football.
Yeah, you could almost kind of pair Joe Burrow and Patrick Mahomes, as long as they're in the league wearing shoulder pads, as you said, their team is going to be contending in some shape, form, matter, mean. They are just, those two guys are going to carry the team almost by themselves.
Yeah,
feels like.
And we talked about it a little bit with Buffalo and Baltimore because they have, and also the Chargers, because they've put these quarterbacks on big contracts, and it's, I mean, a little bit less of a case here with Cincinnati because they did make a Super Bowl appearance. They were, a play away from. There's a world where a couple plays go differently, and this team has won back-to-back Super Bowls. Like, I mean, obviously, we don't know what happens if they get in the Super Bowl against Philadelphia, but
I'm confident in that. I was confident in that, and if we made it to the Super Bowl, we were going to win it. I was very confident.
But a Joseph Ossai push out of bounds, maybe the Bengals are in the Super Bowl last year, and if Joe Burrow has another second, he sees Jamar Chase for a game-winning, historic level, all-time NFL moment touchdown in the Super Bowl.
Oh my God!
I'm just saying we're a couple plays away from this team Joe Burrow being a 2-time champion in 3 years, and 100%. Even after, I mean, obviously in this world, Joe Burrow has just won back-to-back Super Bowls. Joe Burrow is like on Tom Brady pace if that happens. And it's just a couple plays being the difference there to him being
I'm telling
you almost buying an AFC championship ring at one point in time.
You really bring me a lot of pain.
You're just going to go to bed tonight, and after we're done here, it's like 8:30. I'm just going to call it.
You need to go cry in a corner real quick.
Okay.
Just that, dude. That AFC Championship game, we were we at Buffalo Wild Wings during that, and there were like hecklers.
We were we were at Buffalo Wild Wings for the first half, and then we came back to my house. Like, we just drove back home. Like, at halftime, we tried to get back home. It's like a half-hour drive from where we were to my old house.
It was like 40 minutes.
Yeah, something like that. Which I don't know why you agreed to that. I mean, I guess staying at Buffalo Wild Wings for 3 hours is also like not the funnest experience, but
yeah, I couldn't sit there any longer. Yeah, I drove and I did something. It was bad. I almost fought that one guy who was yelling at us. I was so mad because we were getting hoed that whole first half, and then there was a missed call for the Chris Jones pass interference. There was a late hit, and then the 3 blatant holding calls on that last play for Patrick Mahomes was also. But I'm not going to get on my soapbox. I will.
Of course not. You'll never get on your soapbox, will you?
Simply say I'm a little upset.
Yeah, but that's the NFL, man. Like I said, you're a couple plays away from being a 2-time Super Bowl champion. Instead, you've got AFC Championship rings available on NFL Shop for $35 a piece. But I think that's going to do it for us on this episode. We got 2 teams left. If you can't figure it out, it is the Chiefs and the Eagles. I would tell you to guess who's number 2, but it's a lot more intriguing for me to ask you to guess who's number 1. So put in the comments who you think number 1 is. Got one team that is, runner-up in last year's Super Bowl, loaded up a little bit. They added a guy like Jalen Carter, and it just, there's rumors of them maybe adding a Jonathan Taylor. And then one team got our number 1 quarterback that we just talked about and are the reigning Super Bowl champions. So going to be a little bit of a tight debate there between who it's going to be. But very excited. We're wrapping up. We've only got 2 of these left. We should be done by the end of the week. But make sure to go check those out. Be sure to go check out all of the recent ones if you haven't already. Be sure to like, comment, subscribe, all that stuff as well. But for me and Sam, thank you for coming on.
Thank you for having me. I'm privileged.
We try to bring on the fans of the teams, give the fan perspective, get a little bit more insight. Also, the last time we did that, or not the last time, but one of the times that we did that, we doubled our view count on YouTube. So I'm glad you wore the jersey because that was the formula for Mitchell. But we're going to get out of here. Appreciate you guys watching. We are out of here. Peace.